this kind of ties into someone we talked about earlier, which is Tucker Carlson. Like, if you look at all these sort of Tucker threads on Stupid Pool or other sort of left spaces, like, nobody even says when Tucker has some sort of critique of like PMCs or current capitalism or whatever, nobody says like, this is wrong, or like, this is leaving out important bits, or it's not like on a theoretical level, it's not convincing. They just say Tucker Carlson is not a trustworthy guy. He's very cynical.
He's not a comrade.
Yeah, like he doesn't really believe what he's saying. He's just saying it because it's politically advantageous. And there are two obvious points here. First of all, it really doesn't matter whether someone is like cynically allying with the peasantry to defeat the nobility or nobly, because the result is the same. Like. But the second point is just that...
It's just so insane to frame it that way.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. You don't know what's in anyone's head. This is totally irrelevant.
Like people usually do not care about that. Like, that's just sort of... Like, scratch a fucking Leninist Marxotine today and an idealist bleeds.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly, because what do you think people on TV are your friends? Like, do you think that you have access to what they actually believe and that, like, what they're saying is what they believe? I don't look at Tucker Carlson saying shit on the TV and think, oh, he's my ally in the struggle. You're saying,
Aimee,
like,
I don't think they'd care this much, Aimee. I mean, I don't think they'd care this much, Aimee, if they themselves hadn't sort of reversed course. And for the things that they were, very things they were attacking Hillary for, I mean, the Hillary campaign won in every which way.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
they now realize that much of what they're saying is disingenuous. Now, I don't want to just, associate me claiming that with people, but I think the switch is dramatic enough that probably for some of them, they are just saying the same things everyone else is because they've all sensed the shift at the same time. And I think like you, Aimee, or Angela said, like, the work itself is precarious. If this is your only work and this is your field and the field shifts and suddenly, the thing that you thought you could campaign against has become your bread and butter and everybody has lined up on it on the professional, corporate, urban side of things. What else are you going to do? So all of the lash outs that we see are just pure projection. And Aimee became like the ultimate whipping girl for this. It was a fascinating thing. Like, if somebody had come out with her take a year later or after it was wrong or after it, after it no longer mattered, that was all okay. But if she did it, like, my God, then they would quickly leap on her. Why is she saying things? Surely she's saying them in bad faith. Surely it's disingenuous. When in fact, these might be the feelings potentially. It's all projection. I don't want to psychoanalyze these folks because it's not the appropriate materialist method for doing this. But it's quite obvious within this little field that is the media.
I just want to sort of just. Stay on the Tucker Carlson point for a little bit longer because like there's a second sort of glaring issue here, which is, okay, so people don't generally care about like trustworthiness or like noble idealistic goals or whatever. They care about results. But like, can you imagine how much of a admittance of defeat, like how much of giving up it represents that the left is trying to fight someone like Tucker Carlson on the fucking plane of personal trustworthiness. Like, newsflash, nobody fucking trusts the left.
Amazing.
Like, the left is comprised of human garbage. And I don't even mean that as an insult. I just mean that as an objective observation. Like, dude,
correct.
Leftists have no reservoir of goodwill to draw upon. On a personal level, like, these are not people who tend to be very generous towards their enemies, tend to listen to arguments from the other side. Like,
no, it's total scorched earth. They're psychotic.
scorched earth, and also like abandonment, like total gaslighting. So this year we're saying this thing, last year we said this other thing, like Nathan Robinson deleting all his Tara retweets. That's just par for the course. That's how these people operate.
Yep.
Like the idea that these people could actually compete with someone like Tucker Carlson, who is not only a very good sort of TV figure, but like on a personal level, when you see him in like interviews that are in like really small sort of contexts, like this guy is not some sort of robot. Like he is actually likable and the typical kind of person that a lot of people would like to have a beer with, or at least would be willing to listen to if he said, like, if he had something to tell them. Like, you can't say the same thing about the left. So
there's been a very well-funded David Brock operation to slander Tucker for the last 4 years.
yeah,
It's literally like Media Matters has had a whole bunch of David Brock and other Clintonite neoliberal money sunk into turning him into this like white supremacist spectre bullshit because he's quite likable and he used to be on fucking MSNBC or whatever. Like he gave Rachel Maddow her first job and still speaks highly of her.
yeah, like, but this is just so
Like,
absurd.
It's a fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, but like imagine you're a leftist, so you're like a scrawny, like 100 IQ guy, and you look at this gorilla and you say, oh well, this gorilla has a lot of like, you know, he has a political message. But you know what? I'm not gonna try to beat this gorilla on a cerebral level. That would just be beneath me. I'm gonna wrestle this gorilla to the ground here. I'm gonna beat him physically. Like that's just like it's retarded. It's completely like you're not gonna win. Not even Oliver would be able to wrestle down
Nobody could.
Okay, you could, but like nobody else. Like gorillas, they tend to be pretty strong. And so like
Wait, you're talking about leftists and wrestling.
yeah.
Sorry,
I
you
know.
lost me at that.
I know. But like my point here is just that like if you can't beat him by saying like this analysis is wrong or whatever, the idea that you could then say, well, I'm from the DSA, please trust me, and win on that level, that's just like Jesus. You've already given up, my friends. You've totally raised the white flag here.
And they used to laugh at American televangelists or so forth when that was the appeal. Like, you know, I'll make this happen for you, believe me, or American salesmen. They would laugh at that. But their appeal, I mean, if your appeal ultimately just comes down to that versus a combination of this mudslinging, I mean, I guess they were able to get, and we can't, I guess, ignore the fact that they got a Carlson staffer was canned for something for posts or something like that. And then Carlson, was accused of something? But it didn't amount to much.
Oh, that was complete lie. That was it. Yeah, I think
sexual harassment where the timetable didn't line up.
There's a very well-funded set of neoliberal shitheads doing anything and everything they can to try to get Tucker's head to roll. And it's really fascinating to me that these people pretend to be like about the people when Carlson's show is killing it ratings wise, like historically high ratings, and yet the American like corporate establishment consisting in the Democratic Party and the left using like consumer boycotts and advertiser boycotts and all these like underhanded slimy methods to get him off the air. Like that's so fascinating to me, that contradiction.
Yeah, I mean, basically Tucker has the people on his side and all the left has is the corporations, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
A strange showdown. Yeah, go ahead, Malcolm.
Yeah, it's just that, like, even if you get him off the air, this is not a person whose ratings come from, I don't know, being supported by the New York Times, the failing New York Times. Like, this is not a guy who wields whatever power he wields through some sort of loan from, like, an institutional power broker. And ultimately,
that's what they hate that too, because he's got a pirate ship, just like Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Exactly. And so, I mean, this has been going on for a long time in Sweden, so we're ahead of you by a couple of years, like half a decade or something. But you have these figures like Joachim Lamotte, who is sort of
often you have basically one of the forces that kind of brings them down basically is nationalism, small nationalisms within the empire, but not necessarily just those of the colonies, but also internally. So, like if you think of like a figure like Ataturk or something like that, the America First nationalism is a much bigger threat to the American empire than anything. The left greases the wheels of the empire, you know. The left's whole like ideology allows, as much as they may pretend to care about, you know, like all of humanity and the whole world and everything like that. You know, empires always use like universalizing ideologies to kind of justify things that they're doing, whereas that kind of more inward-looking kind of America First nationalism is what really, you know, represents the end for the empire if it is successful. Yeah. And somebody like Tucker kind of represents that, and also, and indeed somebody like Trump. I mean, he's all over the place, obviously, and he's a total disaster. But he represented the possibility of that. And once you kind of light that fuse, it's very hard to ever go back. And I think that explanation that Lynn gave, he wasn't talking about Tucker, he was talking about Trump, but I think it really has stayed with me, and I've been kind of mulling it over for a few days now because a lot of Trump mania or like Trump derangement syndrome has been kind of baffling to me in the sense that I'm looking at his policies and I'm kind of going, I don't really see why he is such a threat to the system. Like, I don't really see why they're going this crazy over him and why they're going this crazy over Tucker. That's a little bit easier to understand, but I think that kind of explains a lot of it. I think that like the left and the American ruling class are kind of as one on many things.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of their open borders stuff and their quote unquote internationalism is really part of being at the center of an empire. And you know, that kind of the politics that like Trump and Tucker and their different ways are kind of moving towards is kind of spells the end of the empire, really. I mean, historically speaking, that would make sense. So I think that's really what is behind a lot of this. They know that this is coming, and that's why they're freaking out.
I think I have a slightly different take, which is that like nationalism, like especially in the early 20th century, like capital, like especially in the late 19th, early 20th century, like capital was national in its in the way that it was institutionalized and structured. And so I think back then, like nationalism was a petty bourgeois orientation. But I think like in this particular moment, like actually capital is global, like it's international. And so I think like the like petty bourgeois nationalism of someone like Carlson or even Trump is actually just like the reason they object so much is because it's a throwback, it's a fetter on continued accumulation. Like if you, by telling citizens that they should expect more from their government, that sort of thing, like I think that presents obviously like not so much a threat, but also just like a sense of, well, yeah, it is a threat to an order if you've suddenly got large numbers of citizens who are no longer okay with the regime as it's currently constituted and the priorities of the regime. that's why I think they object to those two, because they are like a throwback to an era where the regime had obligations to its citizens that it's now thrown out the window. Like deeply you feel it in your heart. You know what I mean? Like that beautiful soul nonsense isn't going to get you anywhere when we're talking about power.
I think it's actually really that they have very bad political intuition. I like right now, for example, they are being handed, they complain all the time about, the liberals are always winning, we lose everything, we lost, divorce and, abortion and whatever issues. And now they're being handed, like history is putting this thing in their lap, handing them this amazing opportunity. What could be more demoralizing than the entire working class of the entire developed world basically just turning their backs on the institutions of the left and fleeing? And the kind of center right, like these parties are kind of like not responding to this. Like they're not taking the opportunity at all.
Yeah,
there's a delay. They're still operating on the institutions of yesterday.
Yeah.
And so there might be some people on the dissident right, like us, or say people on the dissident right, or people like us, or someone like Tucker Carlson. But the majority of the institutional right is this like clunky, incoherent, often contradictory, massive institutions that have been dying since like the 70s and 80s, really, and have not had a new lease of life put into them. Like,
I mean, they're often like guys who are like they came up the ranks as like an oil and gas